I don't know about you, but I've been glued to the news of the Paris heist and the crown jewels. And I guess I'm always fascinated when art crime comes up in the news. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the other kind of art crime that's often covered, which is fakes and forgeries. Something that I know a little bit about. For most of my career, I've been the person in the organization who gets that final say about whether or not something's offered to the market. Generally speaking, they belong to two different categories. The first of which is new creations. These are things that have been made entirely for the purpose of looking like that thing that they're trying to fake. And probably the most notorious example of this in New Zealand is that of Karl, who was a forger who forged many different artists, including Frances Hodgkins and most notably Charles Goldie. He famously changed his name so that he could legally sign his work C.F. Goldie. The second example is things that already exist and which have been embellished. And these are kind of actually the harder one to detect. So for instance, with someone like Frances Hodgkins, I've seen people take, your run-of-the-mill turn-of-the-century watercolor, perhaps an urban scene, sign it Frances Hodgkins. I've also seen people take works that are purportedly maybe something she did when she was teaching a class where she did a little bit of the work, but the rest of it was by a student or someone like that. Sign that, Frances Hodgkins, and try to sell it. And then there's perhaps the most interesting example where, let's say there's a well-known artist, someone like Rita Angus perhaps, and they take the work of an artist that is well known, but perhaps there's less kind of scholarship and attention on their work, and takes their work and passes it off as the more well-known example. Perhaps someone like Juliet Peter, for instance, where she was a younger artist, but there are similarities. There's the sort of social realism thing that you can see in both of their work, even perhaps some crossover in terms of the subject matter. And in certain instances, or viewed through a certain lens, you could see how perhaps with that signature, one might look like the other. How do you avoid these sorts of situations? Well, one of the things I always say is with works like this, there's not one thing that's wrong, there's 1,000 things that are wrong. 1,000 little things that make you think, well, it's kind of, but The other thing that I always say is that, and this is really important, all artists are supported by a small, or they might show at a gallery that's supported by a group or a circle of collectors. And so if someone can't explain how it somehow traces back to that, it likely doesn't. The last thing I'll leave you with, and this is actually probably important in more areas than just collecting art, and it's something I always think to myself, is why is this opportunity available to me? Why is this thing available here and now? Why can I afford it? You should always be asking yourself that in business, in life, in love. See you next week.